Okay, so maybe we can start.
Yeah.
Okay. So good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Yeah, good
Hi.
afternoon and welcome to the DIDI Library, our first ever event for the library project of the DIDI. So e-library is an online interactive platform that allows interpersonal dialogues between people that can gain real-life learnings and inspirations from the DIDI Human Books. So this serves as an open communication channel with the Human Books as a point reference for the audience to gain insights as inspirations for their academic journey and as much as they want to know more about the design profession. So in one way also, this is the library's response to social distancing. So before anything else, I would like to call on the line our Dean, Hani Asfor, for a message.
Hello, everyone. Great to have you here, all of you. And it's a wonderful beginning. The task of any academic institution or anything that needs to improve human existence is to actually try to shift tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge or the codification of knowledge. And what better way than to tap into the knowledge sources that we have, the humans, at beginning with Design District. So today we have very special guests, Dr. Ali Al-Azawi and Fadi Sarayuddin, two people who understand design at a very deep level and apply it at even deeper level with extremely successful results. And so we're very excited that DIDI is actually extending our library from just books and bits into actual living organic tissue. So it's really exciting to have you, and thank you, Donna, for organizing this, and thank you, our guests, for being here.
We're excited.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
An honor, actually.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hani. And maybe also hear a word from our ever supportive president, Muhammad Abdullah. He's also present. President, sir.
Yes, hi, Muhammad.
Hi, Fadi. Thank you, Donna. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Well, let me start by thanking all of you who are joining us today here, and a special thanks to our distinguished guests, Dr. Ali Al-Azawi and Mr. Fadi Sarayuddin. With the whole e-experience everyone is going through these days during this current pandemic situation, I think the e-library comes at the right time. This will be something that will enrich library resources and give our students access to the knowledge and experience of great human books. As we plant the seeds today for the project, I'm sure that it will be of a great value, not only for DIDI as faculty and students, but also for the overall design community. So I will leave it to you to start, and let's all have an enjoyable reading with our human books journey today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, President, for that wonderful message. So, all right, guys. So we're excited to hear the stories of our human books. So, guys, our guests will first share their stories, and afterwards, the audience may ask questions. So, let me introduce to you our first human book. So as the City Experience Advisor of Smart Dubai, he is responsible for the happiness agenda of the city, including the development of scientific and assessment models that underpin its activities. So his academic and professional interests focus on the theory and applications of smart technologies towards happiness in a city scale. So maintaining a strong interest in transferring psychology theory into design practice, he led the research design for projects such as EVG.AE and Saudi Ministry of Interior portal. He later set up and led the first government-based TX lab in the Middle East, where he also led the research and design for the multiple award-winning app, Dubai Now. So ladies and gentlemen, let's hear more of his journey and experience towards success, Dr. Ali Al-Azawi.
It's a pleasure to be here, I have to say. It's something that as soon as the design district was our new home for Smart Dubai. Obviously, it doesn't take much to discover the Design Institute, and I thought, oh, I must be in the right place. So right from the beginning of our move of Smart Dubai's office, the Dubai Institute, the Design Institute has been something on my radar to be involved with. So to be actually here talking to you guys is a real pleasure. Thank you very much for the hosting.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Ali. So let's also hear from our second human book, which is a very humble superstar from Beirut, Lebanon. He joined the American University of Beirut to study architecture and later on acquired a master's degree in architectural design at Proudest School in London. So its experiences resulted in his experimental approach to furniture design. He's also currently based here in Dubai and has his own studio in Dubai Design District offering architectural design and services. So ladies and gentlemen, let's hear more from Mr. Fadi Saridian.
Hello, everybody. It is an exciting, let's say, webinar that we're having now. It's been a year where everybody has been experiencing things for the first time. And we've been working from home for a while now. We've been away from D3 for 2 months. And I'm always like, whenever I'm having like meetings since March and the changes that in everybody's life, I've been trying to gear everything we say or discuss about this pandemic and how is the impact on the human life. And I'm also like kind of trying to push everybody, especially designers. I suspect them to be on the lead towards kind of perceiving this change. They'll be the first people to perceive this change and push for a change. And I think having somebody like the DIDI as our neighbor kind of helps gear up this path towards a new thinking. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Fadi. So guys, we heard both from our human books. So I guess it's a perfect time now. Those who want to know more and may ask questions to our human books, so they can also tell their stories to you, share their stories to you, or their inspiring stories, their inspirations, and others. So anyone, the floor is now open for question and answer.
Yes, hello. Hi.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, yes, my name is Natalie. I'm an interior designer and a student of psychology. I am into neuroarchitecture lately, and I'm wondering if anyone knows what is this and perhaps feels that there is a need to introduce this new word in Dubai. Thank you.
Yes, I can say a little bit about that because I did some work with an academic in Toronto trying to research the idea of happy places. And this is a project that we've done at Smart Dubai actually to look into what makes a happy place, but specifically because of our work focused essentially on the smart technologies, we wanted to understand what are the different aspects of a place. Placemaking, of course, is one, but specifically how can technology support these places. So it's an ongoing project that we've got, but needless to say that neuropsychology gets involved into arranging places in terms of openness, or even very basic aspects such as green and blue places will have an impact. And such ideas are very much evidence driven. There's a lot of psychology literature about the effect of even changing the color of wall. There's a paper I remember where they just literally painted a wall green and had a better outcome for the crime in the area. So as weird as that sounds, it's evidence-based. there's another project that I know of in Aarhus in Denmark, where the local municipality did a prototype change to the local square. So the local square was just a very basic concrete gray area, and these people architects had an idea of creating something of a green place right in the middle of the square. Now, politically, it's quite hard to make permanent changes, but what this architects company did, they said, okay, why don't we do it as a prototype? And this is a key word, actually, that can get you further in trying stuff out. If you use the word prototype, it's essentially saying we can delete it or go back to what it was if it doesn't work out. So it's like a license to try. So they did that. They said, why don't we do this prototype of changing the area to a green place? So they brought in the bulldozers, they created mounds of earth, put grass and trees with the promise that they will remove it. And literally crime went to zero after they put this green place in there with trees. So the mayor of the town had difficulty in saying, okay, well, let's remove this now. Because why would you remove something that was having such a positive effect on people, bringing them together? Because obviously we're social animals, and hence the difficulty we're getting with this COVID-19 virus and so on. So people like people. They like to get together with people in these kinds of green and blue places. So there's a lot of evidence that these things do work, and psychology has a lot to offer architecture. In fact, actually, Jan Gehl, a very famous architect in Europe, his wife, who's an environmental psychologist, said, why don't you guys be using psychology in architecture? And at the time, he thought it was a very strange thing to say. But of course, now we don't think of it as a strange thing to say. It's obvious. So there's a lot of room for innovation.
Yes, no, I think you know a lot about it. It's interesting to know that many people knows the concept, but it's not yet, it didn't take off in Dubai, but took off in South America and Spain. And perhaps we should be the first ones because of our external factors to use neuroarchitecture.
Right. So, we are absolutely looking at this in terms of applying it. I mean, at the end of the day, any kind of government institution is about applying stuff rather than just theoretically studying something. So it's experimentation at the end of the day for innovation. And of course, Dubai is well known for its innovation, so it's not going to be unlikely to see these kinds of experiments and prototypes here. So
thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Ali. Yes, I finished for now.
Paddy, you have something to share?
I mean, Dr. Ali also inspired me to remember something, because when you look at, from an urban level at the old villages, and there's always some kind of the vernacular architecture, especially, I think because vernacular architecture was done by the people, and it was like the relationship of the people with their building and the instincts that were applied were kind of straightforward. And you find these charming villages with very strong, let's say, pleasing, psychologically pleasing spaces for the users. And you wonder why, like there's no science behind it. There's just this instinct of vernacular architecture. And when cities kind of grew out of control, even with modernism, like there was something lost, like that instinct was lost. And I think neuroscience is kind of trying to find this link again. There's obviously like sciences like Eastern sciences like Feng Shui and Vashtu, which try to find it. But I'm sure there was instinctive presence for people and the way they make their cities, which we lost in some way. Dubai is one of the cities that lost it because it was kind of done for the car. And when you walk the streets, you don't have that instinct of like urban design. Why I'm talking about instinct, because I think Hani also knows, he's kind of accused me of this. I have high instinct in my work. Like, I follow my instinct when I'm designing a building or spaces. There's a certain, I allow my instinct to interfere and don't resist it. And in some way, like something, like when the outcome of the spaces I design, they kind of, people respond to them in a positive way. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Fadi. So, any questions more? More questions? Students from the DIDI? Any thoughts?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Nayev.
Naif from the DIDI. I just wanted to know, like, I'm studying currently multimedia and strategic design management, and a lot of what's ahead is very cloudy. So I don't really know after my studies what I'm going to be doing, and especially because I really want to work towards the goal of being the #1 most innovative city in terms of Dubai. I wanted to know, maybe it's a vague question, but what do you think will get us there? Like, what do we need to build on to get to that stage where we're striving to be the #1 most innovative city?
Can say something if that's okay. What I've learned is that ultimately that it's humans that we are working with as designers, as psychologists, as architects, as anything to do with people is. So you need to work on understanding people and their people's needs as a primary input to your creativity. So it's no good just dreaming up stuff that sounds cool, looks cool, and so on. And we all like to come up with ideas. We're in the job of ideas. But if you keep it to what people are like, you know, the nature of people, or specifically their needs, then you're much more likely to succeed than any other endeavor, because people will take up what you're offering them if they want it, or if they need it, especially. Of course, you know, architecture need, but let's just say the need is there without you having to architect it. That would be, I know it sounds very simplistic, but I'm trying to make the point that it's actually quite simple. Address people's nature and needs, then you'll succeed very well. So in the COVID-19 situation that we're finding ourselves, a lot of the difficulties that are arising, and of course these are opportunistic times really, rather than challenging times, it's the need for people to be together. And all of a sudden, you know, the biggest challenges that we found is the fact that we can't have people together. The fundamental thing that people want to do are not allowed to do. This is what's causing the biggest angst and stress in the economy and amongst the well-being of people and so on. So working on how you can address the need for people, whatever it is, especially in this case, socializing and being close to each other, will get you far. It doesn't sound so sexy maybe, but it's what people want. And that's ultimately is what people will buy.
Thank you.
Fadi, I'm sure you've got something to say on this.
Yeah, I think, because the question, I understood the question differently actually, because the question is about how to let Dubai achieve the goal of being the most innovative city?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, so when you say innovative on an urban level or on kind of institutional or companies level?
I mean, the thing is right now what I'm seeing is a lot of it is through these new ideas or like new areas where they're building stuff, and I don't know how long this is gonna last, but I was just asking the question to be like, what is gonna be that edge where what's gonna be different? What's gonna change to keep this innovation rising? And in terms of how we're going about it right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think my view, and in a way, and I'm hoping a lot of people's view will, because of this pause to think that we kind of encountered, like Dr. Ali said, it's not, let's not see it as a problem, let's see it as an opportunity for change. And I still say that designers have to be the lead in this. First, the lead in detecting it, and the lead in providing solutions for it. I think in terms of innovation, we need to kind of, because we have this pause to think, I think, and we need to gear innovation towards what's really important. And sometimes when, like in the past years, the way we've been rushing into kind of developing the city, not only Dubai, all cities have been rushing to be like the leaders in many things, but maybe skipping the fact like what's important, and sometimes skipping the taking care of the well-being of the people. So I think in these times, if we can gear innovation towards what's really important in our lives, and solving the problems that are more, that prove to be more essential now after we've kind of had this pause and saw what's essential. If we can gear all kind of thinking and innovation towards that, that will be like a more sensitive innovation, and this is like more successful in that sense.
Yeah, so I'd like to add to that is, now if what you could be trying to become expert in is putting your finger on that need that people are suffering the most from. And that, just like all designers or researchers, that takes a level of listening skill, listening with your eyes or your ears, but just, you know, that sense of focus on the people or the person that you're trying to solve a problem for. And ultimately, a design is a problem-solving exercise. So first you have to know what the problem is, and for you to know what the problem is, you have to stop talking inside your head and just listen outside. And that's hard to do. And the reason I say that is because it's actually not trivial. And it takes a lot of training, frankly. Not that I'm doing it very well every day, but I try to listen, because ultimately then you're going to get a bullseye when somebody goes, yeah, that's what I want. Thank you for that, because that was the problem that I was having, and you've now fixed it with a pen or with a funky gadget. Either way, as long as you fix the essence of the problem, but first you have to know what the problem is. So listening is the bit that I'm trying to focus on. Try and be expert at finding out, searching, listening to what they're trying to say. And they might not actually say it, and that's the killer thing about design. You're not going to design what the customer says, do it. You're going to listen to what the problem is, and then you're going to come up with a design. So yeah, listen.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. So any more questions from the audience?
I have a question to both of our guests. I was listening to a podcast. It was about conscious innovation, and the debate was about how the pandemic has changed our focus on the future. into a more in-depth occupation of the present. And I just would like to hear a little bit from you about that, because especially in this area of innovation, we are so used of always applying that kind of future framed view to projects. You know, there's so much focus on speculative approaches that always are looking ahead, right? And do you agree with that standpoint, that there is a shift that's happening in terms of the temporality?
Why do you go this time?
Okay. Yeah, I think it is part of what I was saying. Like we, if I understood the question correctly, we've been innovating, and then this pandemic came and shook everybody. Like let's say we have air conditioning in our leather-seated or leather-upholstered BMW, but that didn't help. Like it's like we focused on so many things that are nice, but such a simple thing that hit us, and we didn't have a solution for it, and the world kind of crumbled and came to a standstill. We've seen, I mean, so many attempts at solving, again, trivial issues about our social relationships, which were more geared towards like getting Instagram likes rather than really solving the problem. So, yeah, I mean, in a way, I kind of talked about that. We need to really like pause, look at what's important, and try to find solutions for it. And again, I'm saying it again, sorry, but designers have to be on the lead on that.
The way I was thinking about that question was more about the kinds of things that we should be looking at in terms of the trends, which is kind of like Naif's question. There's a book by a very well-known city science professor, Michael Batty in the UK. And his book's called Inventing the City. And his thesis essentially is to say, nobody can predict anything. Anybody that pretends to predict anything, it doesn't understand the future well, or it doesn't understand the system well enough to realize that actually it's exceedingly chaotic. So in a chaotic system, at best, you might be able to predict just on the horizon. But even that, there's some scientific literature to say you can't even predict tomorrow or the next minute. So how could you possibly predict a year or 5 years from now? So in January, who predicted this pandemic? You know, so 1 month on, we weren't able to predict. So how is it likely that we're going to predict later? So he's saying, well, if we can't predict the future, why don't we make it up? Why don't we invent the future? Which you've heard people say, you know, we should invent the future that we, and I think His Highness Sheikh Mohammed has said this exactly. So rather than wait for somebody else to tell you, or some signals to tell you this is where it's heading, there's an opportunity for you to say, what future would I like for us? And how is it that I can actually work to create that future? What are the pieces that I need to pull together? So in this case, you're not working at the whiteboard level or the sketchpad level of a designer, you're designing at a system level. And of course, we all know systems are exceedingly complex, especially a city, my God, let alone a country. So good luck trying to get it right, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try, because we've seen a lot of cities succeed in terms of a single mind architect with a big grand plan, but they never really work out according to the grand plan itself. So there's this balance between the bottom up and the top down view that eventually arrives at a city, which ultimately is an organism. It's an organic growth. It's never going to be something directed or prescribed in any way. But there are certain aspects of that system which you might want to architect and work towards, and that each one of those architects that are sort of inputting into that system will create that emergence that is the city that is different to another city. So even within one country, you'll have Lyon different to Paris. They're all French people, but they're different cities and they feel different. Why? Because they're emergent. Nobody could actually predict it too much. So I would caution against trying to predict something and work towards that, second guessing that prediction, rather than try from your side creating the endpoint that you want to create, and constantly shifting towards that, adjusting your inputs, the levers, if you like, towards that goal that you're trying to achieve. And you'll have other extraneous circumstances, effects on your actions that will change, actually. And you would have to be, as we all know, any successful system, the most successful system is the adaptive system. So you have to adapt to the changing landscape as well. So don't be thinking, hey, I'm going to stick with that goal by hook or crook, rather than there's a notional goal and you just need to adjust towards that. And that goal might shift according to circumstances. Like if you had a goal in December, should you stick to that goal if it had something to do with socializing project? Like building a project where there are a lot of people getting together. You would not want to do it that way. No, you'd have to adjust it in a different way. So be flexible is the key point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This sounds a lot like the agile methodologies that we apply at DIDI.
Yes. Yes. Listen to these DIDI people. They know what they're talking about.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Renata. Any questions? Any more? Hello.
Should I talk again? So I
Sure,
take it.
yeah, sure.
So I like to say, from what I heard, innovation will be like to create more human-centered designs, to Mr. Ali and Mr. Fadi. So there is a quote from Winston Churchill that I like to mention here, where he said, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." So we believe we can change. For example, Mr. Ali mentioned to adapt and habituate, like in this catastrophe that we are living. This pandemic is a catastrophe, and there is an architect, his name is Juhani Pallasmaa, and I mentioned it to Fadi in one interview, that he said, we have to relearn the art of dwelling, because of this catastrophe had led us like to understand that we need to care more about how we create the spaces where we are living. Like we really perceive the spaces as a stimulus, and they really affect us. And actually they can impact how we adapt, how we can habituate, how can we feel. So if innovation will be to create more human-centered designs, we can be more flexible, like you say. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Natalie. Okay.
Thank you.
questions, sharing of thoughts from the IDI team, from our students, from the library team?
I'll ask a simple question, yeah? Very simple. Ali and Fadi, what books have you read recently?
Your simple questions are not simple, are they?
I'm about to ask that question also.
Why do you go first? Why do you go ahead?
Okay, I mean, yeah, I read a book which I wanted to share. Actually, I shared on my Facebook because it's kind of political, because it's called Golda Lived Here by an architect who turned writer. Her name is Suad Amiri. I love her books because they're very instinctive and they're very simple language. She just went into a journey with her friends into the houses that were kind of taken away from the Palestinians by Israel, and this kind of never-ending nostalgia towards coming back to these houses which are being used by other people. But it was a nice book because it has this political dimension and this nostalgic dimension, but also because she's an architect, the way she described these old houses from the 30s in very much detail, like she made us see the houses. So I actually enjoyed the book a lot. So this was my latest read that I just finished. Yeah, I'm trying to read, to be honest, I'm also trying to read more light stuff, to be honest, because we're like kind of all in an anxious situation in general. So although there's a lot happening, but yeah, I'm trying to read, trying to steer away from like very deep political books, or like books that kind of stress the situation more, to be honest, into something lighter. But this book, I found it like an easy read, but has lots of depth as well.
Well, I'm sure we've all during the lockdown period thought about what to do in the space of our flats or homes and so on. So I usually have quite a range of outdoor activities that I do, but I thought I've had chess on my shelf for a long while, and I thought, okay, well, this is a good time to do that. So I bought a bunch of books, and I've got a chessboard, so I'm just trying to get into that. But then one particular book caught my attention, which is by Garry Kasparov, the former world champion. And that book is about chess, but not about chess. Mm-hmm. And that's what attracted me to it, which is called How Life Imitates Chess. I mentioned it to Hani actually the other day. It doesn't talk about the chess games in the chess detail, which is why I wanted it, actually, because I wanted to sort of have a meta view about the game rather than just the game itself only, and understand how people on the outside of the game and so on trying to understand. But this particular book is really interesting because one of the best ways that we humans learn from is by analogy. And the whole book is the analogy of life. That is what the premise is. And he, of course, turns what one would expect the title to be, which is life, chess imitates life, but he calls it life imitates chess. Because actually, as he goes through the book, he pulls in ideas from the chessboard and how there are these big parallels in the world, in business, in design, in literally almost every endeavor you could imagine. He has pulled out some wonderful examples where there is this parallel with the chess world. So for me, it enriched my activity, which I thought was just a complex game, but into something that I'm now literally seeing life differently because of this. So he is my latest hero, I'm afraid. It's a bit of a cliche, but he has just opened up my eyes into how the world really is actually quite simple in many respects. There are these simple patterns that occur, which I kind of figured out, not that I figured out all the patterns, I don't mean that. I mean that there are recurring patterns that occur. And of course, chess is all about patterns. And so it's been quite a nice twilight zone, actually, for me to sort of live in that between land of between the real world and between the game, which is some contrived set of rules, and each one can inform the other. That is what I'm finding really quite fascinating about this book.
Thank you so much, both of you. Lovely, enlightening.
Okay, thank you. Any more question? Any more sharing of thoughts from the audience?
Actually, why don't we turn this around on Hani? What latest book have you read?
Oh my God, do you want me to get me started? I've been such a voracious reader. So in between, right now I'm reading Machines Like Us by Ian McEwan. He's written a lot. It's about AI, but in the 80s. So it's really beautiful book. I just finished reading Moonfire by Norman Mailer, which is about, I don't know if you can see, is my video on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Norman Mailer. It's about the,
oh, wow.
It's about the rocket, about the Apollo 11 mission.
Yes.
I am reading Umberto Eco as well, always. I mean, little articles, and Borges. So Borges, every day I read a chapter from this book.
Yes. You sent me that short article from Borges. I put it in my to-do list.
And one article from Eco.
Wonderful.
And then today I got this in the mail. So this is about smart cities.
Which one is this?
This is from the MIT Press, Smart Cities.
I don't know this one. Is this a new one?
Yeah, it's a new one. I think it just came out.
Oh, I'd like to follow that up.
And then I've read a slew of thriller novels like Fadi. I want some light things. So I reread Eye of the Needle, Ken Follett, Day of the Jackal, Frederick Forsyth.
Honey, do you know you're a dean of a university here? You need to do work.
I don't watch television. That's the difference.
Yeah, television sucks. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I read a lot. That's a good thing and a bad thing.
Yes.
Okay. So any more? From our students, can we hear from the students, the IDI students? Anyone? They're all silent now.
Why don't you ask something, Donna? You have a whole list of questions, I'm sure.
Yes, actually.
They're scary questions. Don't do that. They're scary.
No, actually, I just want to ask, let's say, what lies are you telling yourself that you usually limits for your progress, for yourself only?
That's the question for Fadi, for sure.
That's so hard. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I kind of.
Is there any lies or something that?
No, we do. We sometimes, like, when you lie to yourself is like when you're trying to do a shortcut, for example. Like in my work, basically, when there's like pressure we're prototyping something, a piece of furniture, but there's also pressure from the client that they want to receive it. So there is attempts at lying, but we end up like not listening to this attempt because like the client is pressuring, he wants his, let's say, library delivered, and we're attempting something, new detail or something, but it didn't work. And we tried to allow ourselves saying like, okay, fine, it's fine. Let's deliver it this way. But then the next day we cancel, we call the client, we say, no, give us 1 more week. We want to solve something.
Mm-hmm.
So we take the hit from the delay, but like we tell him always like, it's gonna sit there in your house for 10 years, 20 years. If you wait 1 week, there's like this regret you won't have, or we won't have. So yeah, there is attempts at lying to ourselves, but we like, it doesn't last like more than 1-2 days.
Mm-hmm.
When you sent us those funky questions of yours, Donna, when I came to that one, I skipped it, and I looked at the other ones, and I came to it again, and I skipped it again, and I just kept skipping it. And I thought, what am I doing? Why can't I answer this question? And I think the answer, the best answer that I came up with is that when I do lie to myself, which we all do, of course, the kind of things that I might say is that thing that I'm thinking about that I'm not doing, it's too big. So that notion that it's too big is the thing that would stop me doing something. But invariably, it's not too big, because I've taken on big projects and small projects. We all have. And the way that I tend to address big projects is by chopping them up into pieces, like how you would eat an elephant, 1 bite at a time. So what are the different components? So, just thinking about it logically. But nonetheless, there's that initial, it's too big. But when you start pushing against that lie, actually it's not. It just needs a systematic approach, and it can be solved.
It's true. So I have this follow-up question with it. Since I know that both of you are so busy and always have this, but how do you push yourselves through your difficult times, Farali and Fadi?
I tend to, I've got a good ability, alhamdulillah, to be able to be dogmatic about something and able to just cut out the noise. I'm talking about noise in my head and noise outside of my head. So there are these little voices, there are big voices and so on, but when faced with a task where it's got a hard deadline that is close by with a lot to deliver, it's just to be able to cut out all the noise. So that's my coping strategy that seems to work for me a lot of the times. Not all the time, but that does work for me.
Thanks. A piece of advice. Good.
I think there's one book by Murakami. It's called What You Talk About When You Talk About Running. And he's as much as a runner as much as he is a writer. And he talked about the time when in marathon running, people face something that's called the wall, where they can't run anymore. And the trick is just like to keep running. Like you don't stop, even if you walk, or just keep moving them. Yes. And I think this is like a good inspiration for me in difficult times. Like if you, obviously, like now we're passing through it economically, and like, as you said, we can't see people, we can't see our loved ones, we can't travel to see our loved ones back home. So how to get along is just to keep pushing, like don't stop, don't just imagine you're in a marathon, but you just have to keep moving your legs. Because
this one I absolutely can identify with, Fadi, because I have run some number of marathons, but before I attempted the first one, I was also worried about this, and I read a few books to how do you run, as in how do you keep that marathon distance. And the one thing that I learned, which absolutely chimes with what you just said, is ask yourself one question only. And that one question, every time you feel like that dip coming up or whatever, just one question, which is, can you take one more step? That's it. It's a super simple question. Can you do one more step? And when you do that, ask it again. Can you take one more step? And it's just the same question every time, which is the same thing in any kind of situation. Can you do one more thing? Which is that motion that you're talking about. Can you keep moving? Can you move one more time? Can you turn the handle one more time? And it's just as simple as that. And it seems to work. Yeah, I absolutely chime with that.
Good trick.
Yes.
This is very helpful for the students at DIDI, especially when facing the challenges in the, the final mile of the semester. And this is great advice. This is beautiful. Thank you.
That's true. Overwhelming, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so any more?
Yes.
Yeah,
this question is actually for Mr. Fadi. Speaking about spaces and furniture, what's the process of putting a piece or a design outside, or like, let's say, like speak about production, and what defines like your piece, or like, let's say, for example, a designer's piece from being, let's say, at the level of Philippe Stark or Karim Rashid, than a piece that's designed in IKEA. Like, how do some pieces get a lot of spotlight, but then others are just like normal pieces and whatever? Like, it's just a sofa, normal one. But others, like, people look at them in a different way, like, and the prices are high or whatever. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's the piece that kind of evokes emotion is the one that takes to that level that you're mentioning. The level of innovation it kind of brings to the table. And this is all usually achieved by the way you think about the new piece, how much you can erase from the preconceived. Because if you want to design a table, and I mean, there's very good design at IKEA. Don't like kind of.
Yeah. I mean, but like you can still see the.
It is on the commercial side, but I mean, the designs they're talking about is like the premise that they want to go is, okay, we want to put something new. You want to design a table, and when you think about it, it really has to be like a blank page. So if you let your mind go to the blank page, and then when you design a new table, there's nothing that is inherited. Even the essentials of it, even erase the essential of it, like gravity, even like start from zero.
Yeah.
Then I think this is how these kind of designs that stand out are achieved, by starting from scratch and then suggesting something new. You can always achieve that new thing because you're really questioned everything along the way.
And how can you put your ideas outside? If you just have, like, for production or to speak to someone, to a company, how can this happen? What's the process of it?
Usually, like we personally, if we have two types of design processes. Like, one is when we get commissioned to do something, and then we design as an answer to a brief, and we do a lot of prototyping, and it's a process where we engage with whoever gave us the brief. And then there's other ones which are self-assigned.
Yeah.
There are things that just come to our mind and then we want to experiment with, so we do the brief initially, and then we start designing accordingly, and then it will be usually geared to be in an exhibition, like Design Days or Milan Design Week.
Yeah.
So this, I mean, our work needs an end user, so it has to be triggered in that way.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're we're almost on the edge of the discussion. So any questions, any more share of thoughts from the audience before we can wrap this up?
Hello.
Okay. I have one last questions to Human Books. So what is the best advice that you can give to our audience, to our future designers that is here in our room today?
I saw that question, and actually I had almost an instant reaction to that question, which was, I mean, the way that it was phrased, it was something like, what advice would you give future designers, or something like that. And my advice is not to use that label. Labels are inherently boxy, and they're limiting in many ways. So giving any kind of label to yourself, especially as a designer, is somewhat preconceived, as Fadi just put it earlier. It has these loaded answers, rather than just seeing yourself as somebody who's flexible problem solver, meaning that you need to find out what the problem is, and just you will find any kind of way to solve it, is something that is more likely to come up with a better answer. So lose the label.
Fadi?
Good advice. Yeah, I think in a way I can put myself in a situation where I can go back, like, although it's been how long, like 20 years since I was in university myself, but I can easily remember this time. And the thing, in a way, I can tell you what I regret, so that this could be turned into an advice, is to actually seize that moment, because is whatever they are, 3 years, 4 years, they're not going to happen again. That's it. Like, this is a really like a kind of rare opportunity on your life. Although it's the whole life is a process and it's just only one chapter in your life, but having that luxury of being in university where you're actually experimenting for the sake of experimenting, and it's not like a means to bring food to the table. You're actually in that very nice space now. And my advice to the students is to seize this moment and like do the extraordinary and use their time to the max.
Yeah, thank you. This is the moment, yes.
Yeah.
If we have other questions from Gonka, for both of you, I guess. What is the proudest moment or project in your career?
Oh, Fadi, definitely put Fadi on the spot on this one.
Project. I mean, there's many that I really relate to, but you know, I mean, I'm an architect, but like my new passion, or like my studio does architecture and furniture, but obviously like my passion more is towards the product design, and it's my like it's still an ongoing project, I would say. This is like the piece of furniture where we came up with like more of a system, and it's called Mainframe. This is a moment where we actually like kind of managed to pause and rethink and look at furniture and see like furniture compared to the, let's say, world of IT and computers is very static. Like you buy a computer and then a new piece comes on and you go and buy more memory, and then you can go buy, upgrade your computer, add to the motherboard, and furniture doesn't have that. So we kind of had that pause and thought, okay, how can furniture catch up to that? And we designed this system where a piece of furniture is not your preconceived one. It's more of a frame that you start with, an empty frame, and then you can pick like a kind of range of plugins. So what I like about it, because it's still ongoing, like the range of plugins that we're adding to it are still happening and still adapting to the new kind of habits. So yeah, this is this is still my proudest kind of project.
For me, I've had many interesting projects. And we were talking about design kind of projects. I'm pretty sure that's what you meant. One that stands out for me is recently, not so recently, about 2 years ago now, we did this project at Smart Dubai, which is the UAE Pass. It's the first national digital identity in the UAE. And the particularly cool aspect about that one is it was a white page start, and just the idea of what the ultimate sort of goal for this thing is to do was the brief. How it was done was a blank page. So really we had to park our preconceived ideas in terms of how to approach that. And in fact, as it happens, initially the proposed solutions were too let's say technical oriented. So they're thinking about the technology and how the technology works. So we had to push back and say, well, actually, you know what, let's just park all that technology stuff aside and let's just think about it from the user point of view. How would the user approach this thing that is supposed to help them achieve this task? So that was particularly good from that point of view, but the main reason why it was a hotspot for me is because that project is so simple in its essence, yet it serves so many people at such a large scale, and to be able to be involved in that project alone, let alone have an influence on the design, just being involved was a real pleasure. But one particular project, which was a completely different story, was one I did in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco. The company approached us. I was working in a consultancy in Chicago at the time. And they said, we have a very technical product, and the people who use it, they use it for its function, but there's no name for it. And the design world it's called the shelf problem. It's a thing that doesn't have a place on the shelves in a store. It's a new kind of object. So it's not like you can go and say, hey, I want a kettle, but I want a really cool kettle. You don't know where to start. So for me, it was trying to understand, get inside the technologist's head who were making it, because they were fixing a problem, and then go and talk to the users. They were using it, but they weren't thinking like the technologists. And then the worst of it all is the CEO of the company says to me, hey, I want this to be the Apple of this product, which doesn't even exist yet. So it was a new kind of object, so that there were no expectations about it. And I had to get inside the technologist's head as well as the user's head on a blank sheet of paper. That was a real challenge. And it was a real pleasure to be involved in that one. So that's why that one was a particular favorite of mine.
So actually you mentioned a while about there's preconceived ideas, and that there's this related question on that from Dalila. Her question is, any advice on how to get detached from preconceived ideas, especially when designing?
Yeah, that's hard. Fadi, you go ahead again. I'm sure you've done this a million times.
It is a challenge. I mean, we are trained since we were born to kind of establish these constructs in our life and take them for granted. And then you reach a point where you're asked to drop them. And it's like, you can't erase it from your memory, but you have to block it. And it's a challenge. You have to like kind of keep erasing in a way, or kind of muting down that part of the brain where it says, table has to have 4 legs. And then you say like, no, it doesn't. Maybe there's something. And this is actually even in the drawing class in university when we were learning how to draw still life. Can't remember actually. I think the left side of the brain is the part that tells you
Creative.
That's why every sorry?
Creative part, I think, is the left, isn't it? Or
I'm not sure. One part of the brain, like it's a common mistake when people draw a table, they kind of tend to let it, because they know the table has a big surface and they always like, that's why children draw the table kind of as if it's flipped
I don't know
towards.
about
Your brain is telling you it's a big rectangle, even that you are seeing it like from a low angle and it's actually small sliver that will show.
Right.
Your brain always tells you like to draw it this way. And this is like kind of similar. You have to shut it down and you can train yourself to shut it down and like design while this blocked. You have to block that preconceived idea.
The way I approach this one is to acknowledge the bias and the preconceived idea, rather than block it. To say, okay, I know I am aware of my understanding of a table having 4 legs and a rectangle thing, or and bracketing it. And that actually is a method that you would use in research, in academic research. There's something called bracketing. Mm-hmm. So you know you've got bias, personal bias, in the way you're asking questions. And you bracket that and you say, I'm going to put that bias here in the corner in the box, and now I'm going to ask the question. And when I ask the question and when I get the answer and the way I perceive the answer, I'm now going to refer to my bias and say, hey, that came with that bias involved. So how can I now take that bias out? So just put that bias and preconception on the table as one of the items to be considered, rather than shutting it into a corner because it won't get shut.
All right. So I guess we have one last question from Salma. How do you define innovation, or are there different types of innovation?
I don't like novelty for novelty's sake. That's what I would have to say on this topic. A lot of people do that. And I think it's a mistake. Fix the problem or find the solution to the problem rather than just novel. So innovate around a better solution.
Okay.
I agree also. Like there's a kind of a proverb. I don't know I don't think they know who said it, but they say like knowledge that doesn't help is like ignorance that doesn't hurt.
That's a great point to end.
Okay, so I guess we're all done. So any more from the audience, or we could wrap it up?
Thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you so much for everybody, and especially to Fadi for being such a good sparring partner. Thank you.
Thank you. I also enjoyed it a lot. I mean, it's a new way of communicating, but that's what we have now, and I really enjoyed it.
Yes, actually, this really are a very great experience for us, because we brought to another level of storytelling that inspires and get better view of our design profession. So thank you so much, our Human Books, Dr. Ali and Mr. Fadi. To our audience, thank you so much for your time, hope we could see you again next time, because this will not be the last, but this is just the first one, and then we will again see each other, hopefully. So
thank you, Hani, and I'll see you at the chessboard, Hani.
Yes, thank you, Ali. Thank you, Fadi and Donna, for organizing this, and all the team behind the scenes who made this work. Ahmad, Aisha, and of course, always our president. Muhammad Abdullah. Thank you very much.
Yes, yes,
everyone.
the DIDI team. And the library team, thank you so much also. The IDI team, thank you so much. So have a nice day, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So
Bye.
much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.